A very good evening to you, South Africa, and those watching around the world. My name is Blaine Herman, and this is It's Topical, our digital audience with us tonight. Looking forward to them weighing in terms of some of the burning questions for our guests in a short while. They'll pop up shortly. Now, the principle of equality is in sharp focus. Judgment in the Democratic Alliance court case challenging the Employment Equity Amendments Act has been reserved by the High Court in Pretoria. Some sticky points. Section 15A. Let me just give you a sense of what we're talking about. I'll just read two subsections of 15A. Gives you context of what we're about to discuss. 1. The minister may, by notice in the Gazette, identify national economic sectors for the purpose of this act, having regard to any relevant code contained in the standard industrial classification of all economic activities published by Statistics South Africa. 2. The minister may, after consulting the relevant sectors and with the advice of the Commission, for the purpose of ensuring the equitable representation of suitably qualified people from designated groups at all occupational levels in the workforce, by notice of Gazette once again, set numerical targets for any national economic sector identified in terms of subsection 1. What does this all mean, Blaine? Well, the DA argues that the Amendment Act is grossly unfair and gives totalitarian powers of social engineering to the Minister of Labour, who will be able to set rigid national targets for every economic sector, they say, without any regard to the context of specific firms, and impose extremely heavy fines and risk of criminal conviction for failure to meet them. That's according to the Democratic Alliance. The Minister of Employment and Labour says she has noted with dismay the DA's stance against transformation by challenging the amendments of the Act, adding that this move is a clear attempt to reverse the progress made since 1994 and maintain the unfair status quo. Those are the sentiments. The court will decide. Where do you fall on this matter? What do you think about the amendments of the Act? What is the appropriate balance between transformation on one hand and fairness on the other? Does the introduction of demographic targets amount to unfair discrimination? It leads us to the question of the week. Let me ask you, how should South Africa balance the goals of the Employment Equity Amendment Act with ensuring fairness and equal rights for all? We'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Let us know at SABC News_TV. Let's walk and talk, get to some context, head over to the magic board. Couple of questions, right? Enhancing workplace inclusivity and transformation. What's the best possible route to take in order to achieve this goal? Let us know at SABC News_TV. Perspective coming up. All right, let's get to some context, and as always, we turn to the magic ball, what we know and why it matters. My guest tonight, SABC News economics reporter Nosipa Khadebe, joins me. Good to have your better mind. We need it. Mine is not as sharp as yours. We need context in terms of how did we get to this point. Talk to us about these numerical targets. How is it determined?
Yeah. Well, very good evening to you, Blaine, and of course the viewers at home. These new regulations certainly mark a turning point for South African businesses, as the Department of Employment and Labour has now officially gazetted then the new employment equity targets and regulations. And when we look at them, it targets businesses that employ 50 or more employees. Right. And it also seeks to highlight certain areas of the population based on race, gender, as well as disability, so aimed at people within those certain groups. And we know that there's also been penalties now that will be imposed for not meeting these numerical targets, and those penalties include fines, as well as not being able to do business with the state. Right. And of course, as I mentioned, all of this targeting those certain groups that have been sort of isolated or left on the peripheries when it comes to the South African economy. And these were all based on consultations that the department has had with various stakeholders.
As far as, what, 2 years ago?
Yes, indeed, 2023, of course. So it's been a lot in the works. It's not something that happened overnight. But it's also based on stats. You know, Stats SA releases the data showing us who is in the economy, who's participating and who isn't. And we know that the quarterly labor force statistics, those are due out later on this week. And so it looks at that. And it's also based on best practices. We know certain countries like Canada, they've also had these sort of employment equity regulations where the government imposes then this imposes these targets then on transformation. And these also have a historical context. When we look at South Africa, we know that we come from a past of racial discrimination, and so a lot of that has been entrenched in certain sectors of the economy, and these new regulations as well as targets aim then to redress that, ensure that more people are included in the economy and can actually participate, because we've seen on the certain managerial levels, decision-making positions, that those are sort of earmarked for certain people within the population. We know that it's dominated mostly by white males, and so this then seeks to redress that lack of transformation that we've been seeing despite the 30 years of democracy.
I want to get down, we'll flesh that out in greater detail in a short while. As we know in this business, words matter. It matters in business generally as well. The fundamental difference between equality and equitable, why should we care about the meaning?
Well, the differences, Blaine, lie in the approach to fairness, because these new regulations aim to sort of bring out tangible results when it comes to fairness. And when we look at the word equality, it sort of looks at or assumes that we all start from the same sort of playing field or same sort of level, and so then the distribution of opportunities and resources then is based on that. Whereas when we look at equity, it takes in the individuals, the individual sort of circumstances into account, and based on that then the sort of opportunities and resources then are distributed on that level. And when we look at policy then that's based on equality, the issue then is that this can sometimes have the undesired outcome of not sort of having the outcomes based on fairness. And so that's where the equity sort of comes in, this equitable sort of redress based on the past discriminations that we've been seeing within the country.
I want to talk about the structure of occupational levels and how the Act talks to the issue of the targets and what should companies be aware of.
Certainly. So when it comes to the occupational levels, we know that there's targets. It's set out that from the 1st of September to August of 2030, that businesses must implement their employment equity plans within that 5-year period. And it's based off of workplace factors, including the workforce profiles, and so businesses will have to then implement those. And I guess this is where the contention also comes in, Blaine, when we look at what's happening in terms of the courts and politically. There's this fear then that this will be used as a tool to fire people and put other people within these positions. But it's not a sort of rigid then approach when it comes to this, because businesses then that cannot sort of meet these targets can then will need to justify to the government why they've been unable to meet these targets based on factors around the economy and various other factors.
What do we understand in terms of companies' choice in the matter? Do they use regional, provincial, national demographics when they are trying to work out how to meet those targets? And of course, they'll maybe say, for instance, after the first year, we'll hit 20%, second year we'll go. So do they go on in their own pace, and what are the rules around that?
Yeah, certainly. So, Blaine, the rules around that is that they will be looking at the various demographics then within a regional level, so a provincial level. What are the demographics that we're seeing in terms of the various races, African, coloured, as well as Indian? Also, what are we looking at in terms of the certain genders? And we know with the genders, they want to push for all genders then to be included within the various occupations. And as I pointed out, then when it comes to then businesses not meeting these targets, they will need to justify to the department why, based on the technical skills that they, the pool of talents that they might have, that it might be unable to fill these sort of positions based on that. But when we look at filling the positions, the department is clear that it's people with the skills, so it's not about filling the positions with unskilled sort of people.
Very briefly, the goal is to for inclusivity and diversity. That's the goal. What is the realities on the ground?
Certainly, Blaine, the realities that we've been seeing on the ground is that when we look at representation, it's not fully where it should be. Transformation in South Africa has not been where it has the standard that it should be. And we know, given the entrenched inequalities that we come from, this past of apartheid, that there hasn't been enough sort of redress when it comes to that. And so these new laws, regulations and targets then aim to ensure then that we see more people included in the economy. When we talk about shrinking tax base, this is where that comes in, where we're seeing that people who are excluded from the economy when they should be included in the economy, that's the issues that the lack of transformation bring about. And so this seeks to ensure then that we've got the right amount of representation when it comes to race, gender and disability. You're
the right person to tee up this discussion. Thank you very much indeed. Sabc News economics reporter Nosiba Hadebe. Context, always important. We will discuss further. Let's get on our hooves for this discussion. Look, there's lots to talk about. I want to try to peel back or push back the curtain and give you a sense of how this will affect you and your family. Advocate Tertius Wessels, advocate and managing director at Strata-g Labour Solutions, joins me now live. Thank you so much for joining me. Also, virtually, we have Karabo Khachau, national spokesperson for the Democratic Alliance. I hope I can, there we go, top left-hand side, and then Zanele Sabela, COSATU spokesperson, joining us virtually as well. Thank you so much for joining us. Our digital audience, as always, you play a key part in this. Please get in your questions as early as you can. Put up your virtual hand. Do my very best to get you on air. Let me just start with you, Karabo. The case reserved, we await the judgment. Equitable representation of suitably qualified individuals from designated groups across all occupational levels. On the face of it, it sounds like the legislation wants to help address the historical inequalities of the past. Why do you have an issue with that?
Hi, Blaine. Thank you so much for having me. Good evening to my co-panelists, the gallery here online, as well as South Africans who are tuning in. The language used sounds very attractive. It sounds very pro-equality in the country, right? However, when you judge legislation, you need to judge it according to its outcomes, not just the wording on it. So outcome number one says that South Africans who, for example, reside in the Western Cape, who majority of them are colored people, who on a national scale, however, do not make up the majority tally of the country's population, automatically are going to have to then be able to take a step back when seeking for job opportunities in their province of majority.
How so?
It means that white people, Here, let me finish the sentence and I'll get you how so. So it means so what it means is that because the current regulation tally divides the proportion, saying that black people must get preference first, and then it goes on. It means that in the Western Cape, where black people are second in terms of number to the Western Cape, will get job opportunities over colored people who are a majority in the Western Cape. That sounds like it shouldn't be a problem, but it is a problem if I am told as a colored person that in order for me to apply for a job and to qualify, once the quotas have been met, I have to go live somewhere else.
Is that,
and that's
right.
Problem number two is this. Yes, Blaine?
No, go complete your thought, Karabo.
Okay, so problem number two here, Section 9 of the Constitution, subsection 3 of it is very clear that quota systems are not supposed to be considered. So when you tell a person they can't get a job opportunity, even though they qualify for that job that they're applying for on the basis of their race and on the basis of their gender, you ultimately are in contradiction of Section 9 of the Constitution, which shouldn't even be a consideration to begin with, because the Constitution of this country dictates so. Now, number 3 here, the reason why we find ourselves having this conversation is, yes, it's true. The ANC in the last 31 years has been very slow in addressing the inequality that exists in the country. And the only reason why we are lagging behind is because the jobs that have been created in this country do not meet the demand for them. So if you were having an economy that was growing at a fast enough rate, then you wouldn't have a problem where majority of the people who were disenfranchised during apartheid are still sitting outside of job opportunities. Then people would have jobs that they would be able to fairly compete for. And that's something that we must be honest about. What the ANC is trying to do with this legislation is they're trying to play catch up. So because they know people haven't had jobs, they haven't grown the people's economy. They haven't given them job opportunities. So what's the next best thing? Instead of giving them jobs, we're saying, okay, with the little that we have, then we're going to say who can get that job and who can't have it. That does not make sense.
Let me bring in Advocate Tertius Vessels. With regards to the example that Karabo used in the Western Cape, is the understanding that the employer can use either regional, provincial, or national demographics when considering how to formulate or how to reach that 5-year target? For instance, they will go in and say, okay, after the first year, I'll hit 30%, and then we will see how we proceed. Is that accurate from what Karabo is saying?
Yeah, so it very much depends on how the employer operates. So if you have an employer that operates on a national level, or whether or not you have an employer that operates over 2 provinces, they may have to take into consideration the demographics of the province in which the majority of the employees are based. Now, if one starts to consider that these targets are somewhat inflexible to a certain extent, because the legislation talks about the employer must achieve these numerical goals. And because these numerical goals are then accompanied by the threat of a fine or a penalty, the argument is then that it amounts to a quota, which is against the Constitution, as well as Section 15 of the Employment Equity Act itself, which says that affirmative action measures are legitimate, it's justifiable, we understand the need for it. And I don't think anybody is in essence against redress. I think it's just about the manner in which we're going about implementing it. Because there is unfortunately a fear amongst many employers that if I fail to meet those targets at the end of my 5-year plan, because yes, there's flexibility. There's nothing to say you have to reach a certain percentage in year 1, 2, 3 or 4. But it's very clear that you must achieve those targets by the end of year 5. And the question is then, what happens? I lose a compliance certificate, I'm unable to do business with the state, and what impact is that going to have on employers and their ability to secure jobs for those employees?
What could be the suitable reasons given for not complying with the prescribed targets? Could it be recruitment process, not finding the suitable candidate? Is that justifiable?
Yeah, so there's a variety of reasons why an employer can justify not meeting it. It could be limited recruitment opportunities, scarcity of skills within the designated groups, CCMA awards, court judgments, mergers, acquisitions. All these things have an impact on the employer's ability to obtain those targets. If I, in my small organization, am fortunate enough that none of my employees leave, they don't resign, they don't die, then how am I supposed to achieve those targets at the end of the day?
Zanele, let me bring you into the conversation. Reflect for us your perspective in terms of the realities on the ground and how this legislation would either help or hinder transformation going forward.
Hi, thank you so much for having us. So the situation as we see it is the fact that the Employment Equity Act has been with us for the longest time. Karabo mentions that it's 31 years into democracy. 31 years into democracy, we're sitting at a point where 62.1% of top management in this country is white, when they only make up 7.7% of the labor force. When you look at black people make up 80.1% of the economically active population in this country, and they only make up 17.1% of top management. So clearly, I mean, without going into the other groups, which are also lagging behind, the colored people are lagging behind, without going into there, you'll see that obviously we are not doing what the Constitution says we should be doing, which is to right the wrongs of the past. And so it's one thing for the DA to say, no, nobody argues with redress. But what they're doing actually right now is actually arguing against redress. We cannot continue to live in this kind of situation where we actually have workplaces that are virtually look like apartheid. It can't be 31 years into democracy, and Karabo will say that it's the ANC's fault. The DA is now part of government. We need to get on with it, and we cannot keep being the way we have been. It needs to transform. The economy needs to transform. And when we speak about the penalties, it's the only thing that business understands. Business only understands their profit motive. And if you hit them where it hurts in terms of their profit motive, that's when they will start to act. This nicely, we encourage you to make up your plan and to transform your workplace, obviously hasn't worked. And so we need to get to a point where, and also when you say you can't put down targets, that means we're just talking motions all over again. We are just going softly. You need to put down targets so that we know what we are going towards. 5 years is a very long time for businesses to get on with it. And so we don't see anything wrong with it, and we want to see this happen, and we are fully behind the Minister of Labour on this one.
Karabo, if not through legislation, how do we address the inequalities of the past? What has the DA done in order to ensure that companies are transformed, given our history?
So yes, let's first deal with this, Bain, and I'll come back to this answer. So the assumption that 5 years is enough time to transform and replace the top slice of management, one assumes that the management is either going to die, or the next argument is if they don't die, then they must be killed. That itself is just, it's not going to happen. But two, it also makes the assumption that people must be fired in order for their positions to be filled by people that, according to the Employment Equity Act, are suitable for those positions. That doesn't work, because that's not how life works. The next thing you want, you're going to say that it is wrong for you to have a job in South Africa if you're not black, or if you are not if you were not done hard by apartheid, which is problematic, because the issue here at hand is that we're not operating in an apartheid reverse. system. We are operating in a democratic system that makes it very clear that you can't tell anybody who is a South African who qualifies for a job that they can't get that job because they don't have the correct skin tone, or they don't have boobs, or their genitals are not the correct suitability according to requisites. But it's also true is that we are lagging behind as a country as far as making sure that majority of this country's people are found in and not just low entry level job opportunities, but also in top management positions. And it is possible for us to be able to do so. Again, expand the economy. The businesses that we currently have are not enough to absorb South Africa's population or population's need for jobs. That is true. It's not going to happen. And the reason why in the Western Cape we have a 19% unemployment rate, which means that majority of the people who are employed are people of color in the Western Cape who are colored and black people, is because we have mastered the engineering of making sure that there's an expansion of an economy, that more businesses are formed, that there's a greater pool for people. Another thing that we must be honest about,
what part did legislation play in getting those results in the Western Cape in terms of the employment equity?
So the legislation has to do with the ease of doing business in the Western Cape in particular. What the Western Cape government has done is to do away with red tape, such as the requirements of doing business, for as an example, which unfortunately the current employment equity adds to that red tape and the threat that you must comply with one element, or else if you don't comply, then you're out of business and you're closing shop altogether. That is one example of how legislation, as far as the ease of making business is concerned, has been applied in the Western Cape and has been able to bear fruit as far as job opportunities is concerned. The bottom question here that we must be honest about is the fact that the Democratic Alliance's alternative in saying that grow the economy and do not throw people out of job opportunities because of the color of their skin is not anti-transformational, in the sense that we are refusing that it makes sense in democratic South Africa to copy and paste the apartheid government's way of governing in order to address the matter, because that's just an apartheid 2.0. Then we might as well close shop and say, as a Republic of South Africa, we are not democratic. And then the second argument that I want to quickly close on is that when you open up opportunities, because black people are qualified, you don't need to tell me that I will get a job as a black woman in South Africa because I'm a black and I'm a woman. I will get that job because I'm qualified as a South African and because many of my people have the skills to put on the table and to fairly compete with other people of other races in this country, in some instances outperform them.
Zanele, I want you to respond before I go to a break.
So Karabo talks about she shouldn't just get a job because she's a black woman. That's not what is being said. But what has actually happened is black people are not even getting a foot in the door. They are not even, so it's quite hard to be top management when, quite frankly, you're not even getting a foot in the door. So in terms of, they're saying that we need to grow this economy. No one will agree with you more than Kosati. We need to grow this economy. So if the DA can actually take what it has done in the Western Cape and actually show us how we grow this economy, because we do need to grow this economy. We have 41.9% unemployment in this country, and our economic growth has been lingering at 1%. So if they can do that without necessarily shooting down the fact that we still are untransformed and we don't want people to die or people to be short. No, Karabo, the fact of the matter is the people have died in the last 30 years and they've gone away, but they've just been replaced with people who look exactly like them. And this is what the problem is. People want to hire the people that look exactly like them, and this is why we haven't transformed. And so that needs to stop. Everyone needs to, the qualified people must get, but then that's the thing. The qualified people are not getting a foot in the door because they're just not the right color, and that needs to change.
All right, let's pause it there. I need to take a quick break. What about the notion of just letting business deal with the transformation steps or targets on their own, unpoliced? What is the risk in that? I'll put it to my panel as well as digital audience weighing in with some of their burning questions. Next.